November 29th, 2025. Deep beneath the ancient streets of Pozzuoli, something that should not exist is building toward catastrophe. A perfect geological storm, according to scientists, has all the ingredients for disaster: the burner, the fuel, and the lid. The burner is molten magma chambers feeding relentless heat from below. The fuel is billions of gallons of groundwater seeping into a sealed subterranean reservoir. The lid is self-healing caprock that traps pressure like a champagne bottle shaken for decades. This morning's violent steam explosions were not isolated volcanic eruptions. They were pressure releases, ominous geysers marking spreading fractures in the rock lid that has been precariously holding back a cauldron of superheated water and gas directly beneath 900,000 unsuspecting residents. The mounting pressure is already reshaping the underground. And here is the terrifying twist that has researchers on edge. Every new crack that temporarily releases pressure at the same time lets even more groundwater flood down into the sealed reservoir. More fuel, more pressure, more violent and unpredictable explosions. So the question haunting volcanologists and emergency planners tonight is chillingly simple. If this self-perpetuating cycle of geological Russian roulette can only end one way, in catastrophic failure, are we watching the early warning signs of an impending mega-disaster? Are these escalating steam blasts the opening salvo of Europe's next great natural catastrophe? And what happens when the overburdened caprock does not just crack, but shatters completely under the mounting pressure? To understand the scale of the threat simmering under Pozzuoli, we have to dig into Campi Flegrei's deadly past. In Greek mythology, this volatile landscape was ominously called the literal entrance to the underworld. Ancient civilizations understood something that modern science is only now beginning to grasp. Campi Flegrei isn't just another volcano. It's a monstrous geological time bomb, a looming doomsday device capable of continent-altering devastation. 39,000 years ago, the apocalyptic Campanian ignimbrite eruption ejected over 70 cubic miles of scorching magma and pulverized rock into the stratosphere. Global temperatures plummeted, seasonal cycles unraveled as summer abruptly surrendered to volcanic winter. Sprawling expanses of Europe and Russia vanished under suffocating volcanic ash. It was, quite possibly, the closest human civilization has ever come to total extinction. But shockingly, that was not even Campi Flegrei's most devastating blast. Fast forward 24,000 years, and the infamous Neapolitan yellow tuff eruption hollowed out a massive 8-mile-wide caldera, a yawning supervolcano crater where the densely populated metropolis of Naples precariously perches today. To put that in perspective, imagine the immense blast radius of Campi Flegrei's last full-scale eruption. A smouldering crater the size of 50 Central Parks, left behind by one of the most explosive events in European history. Dr. Giovanni Macedonio, senior researcher at Italy's revered National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology, ominously warns that Campi Flegrei has produced two of the largest and most climatically impactful eruptions in all of European history, and that in both instances this deceptively quiet volcanic system explosively reshaped the face and future of an entire continent. Since its last comparatively minor eruption in 1538, Campi Flegrei has lulled authorities into a false sense of geological security, while simultaneously exhibiting an ominous cyclical pattern that has volcanologists increasingly on edge. These warning signs include repeated cycles of aseismic ground swelling and deflation, known as bradyseism, that last for decades. Exponential increases in local earthquake frequency in the lead-up to major hydrothermal events and unrest episodes, and intensification of hydrothermal activity like steam vent geysers and boiling mud pits prior to eruptions. But what we are witnessing now is different, and that difference has experts warning it could change everything. To understand just how rapidly things are escalating, we need to rewind to the 1980s, when an unprecedented Brady seismic crisis rocked Pozzuoli. In just 2 years, the city's harbour rose a staggering 6 feet, 1.8 metres, rendering docks unusable as the ground itself bulged upwards. 40,000 terrified residents fled as a swarm of 16,000 earthquakes rattled the groaning caldera. Then, almost as suddenly as it began, the upheaval ceased. Scientists prematurely breathed a sigh of relief, declaring it a failed eruption, theorizing that the building pressure had vented harmlessly without triggering an explosive event. But new research reveals they could not have been more wrong. A groundbreaking study, led by Dr. Tiziana Venorio at Stanford University, discovered that the 1980s event was not a fizzled eruption, it was merely phase 1 of a far longer, more dangerous cyclical mechanism. Using cutting-edge seismic imaging and AI modelling, Dr. Venorio's team identified the smoking gun, a vast sealed geothermal reservoir trapped beneath Campi Flegrei's ancient caldera, gradually building pressure like a geological time bomb, patiently counting down to detonation. Here is how the chilling step-by-step mechanism works. First, groundwater steadily seeps down through tiny cracks in the caprock, which are pried open wider over time by relentless seismic activity and deformation. Second, that groundwater floods into the sealed subterranean reservoir, where it is quickly superheated into pressurized steam by the roiling magma chambers below. Third, as pressure builds to critical levels, the elastic caprock above bows upwards, before suddenly fracturing just enough to allow pent-up steam and gas to violently vent. Fourth, the overlying caprock then slowly self-heals as mineral deposition and hydrothermal activity reseal the reservoir, trapping the remaining pressure in an even more tightly clamped geological pressure cooker. Fifth, now more extensively fractured, the compromised caprock lets even more groundwater seep down into the reservoir during the next phase, further increasing the amount of fuel that will flash to steam. Repeat steps 1 through 5, with escalating pressure, more extensive fracturing, and increasing volumes of groundwater flooding the sealed system during each successive cycle. It is a diabolical, self-perpetuating feedback loop that has been quietly building to a devastating geological crescendo for decades, a subterranean bomb exponentially arming itself with each iteration. And now, the mounting evidence indicates that Campi Flegrei's simmering cyclic caldera may be rapidly approaching critical failure. In a shocking 2025 analysis, a Stanford geophysics team revealed that next-generation AI algorithms, trained on petabytes of high-resolution seismic data, have detected a staggering 75% more earthquakes rumbling beneath Campi Flegrei than traditional monitoring methods over the last 2 years. Pozzuoli residents felt 12,000 unsettling tremors since 2022, but the advanced AI determined there were actually 54,000 quakes invisibly rattling the groaning caldera. The implication is clear and chilling. This deceptively quiet supervolcano is not soundly sleeping, it is stealthily building towards catastrophic failure right beneath our feet, hidden in plain sight. Even more terrifying, the same AI models exposed an immense and unstable ring fault system spiderwebbing beneath Pozzuoli, a looming seismic threat that Dr. William Ellsworth, a world-renowned geophysicist at Stanford, bluntly sums up. The presence of these sizable circumferential faults, coupled with the ongoing Brady seismic deformation, suggests the potential for an earthquake in the magnitude 5+ range is rapidly increasing, a scale of seismic event that Campi Flegrei has not experienced in centuries. Over the last 2 decades, an undeniable and alarming pattern has emerged, relentlessly accelerating beneath Pozzuoli. Ground uplift in the caldera is now following a steep parabolic curve, with total deformation reaching 1.4 meters by November 2025, a shocking increase from mere centimetres in the early 2000s. Local earthquake frequency is exhibiting an unprecedented super exponential growth trend, indicating the caldera is rapidly building to a catastrophic tipping point. Maximum earthquake, magnitudes of magnitude 4.4 to 4.6, in 2024 to 2025, are the strongest seismic events ever recorded in Campi Flegrei's long and tumultuous history, and are ominous precursors of potential magnitude 5+ quakes ahead. Monthly earthquake counts have skyrocketed from hundreds per year to thousands per month, a 1,000-fold increase in seismic activity rates. A November 2025 scientific consensus study urgently warns that the ongoing surge in seismicity and deformation indicates the potential for significant seismic events in the near future if the current Brady seismic crisis continues accelerating along its present trajectory. But why is this escalation so uniquely terrifying? Because Campi Flegrei's rapidly worsening unrest arises from a cataclysmic convergence of geological factors, a literal perfect storm of interrelated conditions that could unleash continent-altering destruction. Burner, seething magma chambers are mere kilometers beneath the surface, constantly injecting scorching heat that flashes groundwater to steam. Fuel, billions of gallons of heavily mineralized groundwater have been steadily recharging the sealed hydrothermal reservoir for over 24 years. LID, a self-healing caprock reseals after every fracturing event, relentlessly trapping and ratcheting up the pressure indefinitely. Trigger, a rapidly destabilizing ring fault system could catastrophically fail in a cascading rupture, unleashing the pressure cooker in one devastating seismic event. Dr. Venorio recently said that Campi Flegrei is a uniquely dangerous tectonic time bomb. She warned that all the destructive geological ingredients are in place, synergistically amplifying each other. The devastating potential only intensifies with every unrest phase. It is not a question of if, but when Pandora's box finally shatters open. On November the 29th, 2025, at 3:42 in the morning, the residents of Pozzuoli experienced an unprecedented escalation that kicked the looming volcanic threat into horrifying overdrive, violent hydrothermal steam explosions suddenly tearing through the ancient city's streets, a tragic first sign that the simmering caldera's pressure cooker lid is beginning to buckle. Superheated geysers blasted skyward over 12 feet, or 4 meters, transforming morning commutes into desperate evacuation routes choked with volcanic mud. Plumes of noxious, mineral-laden vapor billow from widening fissures that cut jagged scars across roads and alleyways. But these hydrothermal blasts aren't isolated volcanic outbursts. They are ominous precursors of the mounting pressure, inexorably building to catastrophic failure deep underground. Each new fissure, fracture, and fumarole is a symptom of the weakening caprock, straining to contain a rapidly destabilizing reservoir on the brink of unleashing high-pressure steam with explosive force. A super-pressurized subterranean chamber that, with every crack in the rock, simultaneously releases pressure while letting more groundwater flood the system and flash to steam. When the overstressed ring fault finally shatters in a cascading rupture, the unfolding disaster would escalate at a breakneck pace. 85,000 terrified residents scrambling to flee the immediate 15 square kilometers deformation zone as the ground quakes and infrastructure crumbles. Over 15,000 vulnerable buildings across Pozzuoli buckling and collapsing, built on unstable ground with obsolete or non-existent seismic engineering. The Naples metropolitan area, home to over 3 million people and Italy's third largest urban expanse, paralysed by intense seismic shaking from the M5+ main shock. Highways, bridges, mass transit lines, airports and seaports overwhelmed by panicked evacuees and crippled by structural damage. A destructive domino effect playing out in harrowing real time. Mere seconds for buildings to implode from seismic shockwaves. Minutes for the city to descend into total mayhem. only hours for the chaos to ripple outwards into a full-blown continental crisis. As more and more groundwater surges into the fractured hydrothermal chamber with every steam blast, the subterranean reservoir transforms into a rapidly escalating feedback loop of devastation. Relentlessly building pressure fuels progressively larger, more violent and more frequent steam explosions, rocketing to the surface through an increasingly compromised caprock. Unstable building foundations shudder and crumble, undermined by networks of widening fissures, scalding mud, and the explosive force of superheated steam venting. Clouds of toxic gases from the depressurizing geothermal system, like hydrogen sulfide, radon, and carbon dioxide, blanket escape routes, poisoning evacuees. The structural integrity of the vital coastal ports of Pozzuoli and Naples is fatally undermined as the ring fault's destabilization rips steam vents open across the seafloor. But the apocalyptic worst-case scenario looms like a geological sword of Damocles over the region. If the pressure cooker's fragile lid completely fails, the result would be a catastrophic, high volcanic explosivity index eruption on par with Campi Flegrei's continents reshaping ultra-Plinian events of the past. The sudden decompression could explosively excavate the caldera in a devastating phreatomagmatic blast. An 18-mile, 30-kilometre eruptive column ejecting millions of tons of volcanic ash into the stratosphere, creating an inescapable no-fly zone across Europe within 6 hours. Towering pyroclastic flows of searing ash, pumice, and volcanic gas, reaching temperatures of 1,472 degrees Fahrenheit, 800 degrees Celsius, and racing outwards at 30 to 60 miles per hour, 50 to 100 kilometers per hour, incinerating Naples. A choking ash plume blanketing southern Italy and the Mediterranean in a thick layer of razor-sharp volcanic glass, triggering a catastrophic respiratory crisis affecting upwards of 50 million people. The total collapse of the European Union's economy and transportation infrastructure as ash clouds paralyze supply chains, airports and seaports from London to Istanbul. But perhaps the most horrifying aspect of Campi Flegrei's looming eruption is what is quietly lurking in plain sight. Just 9 kilometers away, Mount Vesuvius. Volcanologists warn that a major explosive event at Campi Flegrei could transfer immense seismic stresses to its infamous neighbour, a literal 1-2 punch that could awaken the notorious stratovolcano from its almost 80-year slumber. The devastating result would be an unprecedented double eruption, with both volcanoes simultaneously venting their fury on the helpless populace in a relentless onslaught of destruction. Dual eruptive columns darkening the skies and raining down thick blankets of scorching ash and volcanic bombs across the Campania region. Converging pyroclastic flows from both calderas, roaring outwards at hurricane velocities to consume the Naples metropolitan area in an inescapable fiery onslaught. The mandatory emergency evacuation of over 3 million residents from Europe's most densely populated volcanic region, unleashing a refugee crisis of historic proportions. A towering plume of thick volcanic ash injected into the stratosphere by the combined explosive power of both volcanoes, ushering in a sudden and devastating volcanic winter. Global climate impacts lasting months and even years, from plummeting temperatures to disrupted precipitation patterns that could cost the world trillions and risk famine and resource wars. Dr. Giovanni Macedonio anxiously monitors Campi Flegrei's vital signs from the Vesuvius Observatory overlooking Naples, keenly aware that he may be the last line of early warning. An omnipresent red phone sits on his desk, hardwired to the National Civil Protection Headquarters in faraway Rome. He tests the emergency hotline twice daily, knowing that one urgent call from this volcanological nerve centre could be all that stands between an orderly evacuation and total chaos for one of Europe's largest metropolitan areas. Dr. Macedonio's voice fills with quiet urgency as he gravely intones. Two of the most recent earthquakes are the strongest seismic events we have ever recorded at Campi Flegrei. Several suburbs have already been critically damaged. Families who evacuated the most affected zones in March and June are still unable to return home. Their communities are rendered uninhabitable. The historic centre of Pozzuoli is beginning to resemble a war zone. We are witnessing an unnerving pattern that keeps escalating relentlessly. The warning signs are converging towards a catastrophic crescendo with each passing day. A staggering 5 earthquakes exceeding magnitude 4 on the Richter scale in 2025 alone, an unprecedented rise in seismic activity rates and clustering behaviour. High temperature, steam explosions and mud geysers are increasing exponentially in frequency, in temperature and in explosive force across the caldera. Next generation AI algorithms are revealing shadow swarms of low-frequency microquakes, invisibly building stress in the crust, over 4 times more tremors than surface instruments detect. Explosive ground deformation has reached a record-shattering 10 centimeters of uplift per year, a staggering increase from the historical average of 1 to 2 centimeters per year during unremarkable flux. As Dr. Warner Marzocchi, Macedonio's colleague at the University of Naples, bluntly stated in a recent interview, "We must face a grim reality that is difficult for many of my peers to acknowledge openly. In truth, we do not have any control over Campi Flegrei's rapidly escalating unrest. The immense forces involved are beyond human influence and intervention. Nature, and nature alone, now holds all the cards. All we can do is vigilantly monitor, soberly assess, and pray that our early warning systems can provide authorities with enough of a head start when the inevitable finally unfolds." Perhaps the most terrifying and unpredictable aspect of Campi Flegrei's rapidly accelerating unrest is the uncertainty that haunts the dire warning signs. This uniquely dangerous volcanic system could conceivably continue ratcheting up pressure and deformation for years or even decades, a slow burn building to an explosive tipping point, or it could catastrophically fail tomorrow in a sudden high VEI blast that would rewrite European history with little warning. In a chilling twist of geological irony, the recent dramatic uptick in steam explosions and seismic activity simultaneously serves as an urgent warning to humanity, while also directly hastening the caldera's destabilization. Each hydrothermal pressure release is the volcanic equivalent of both a smoke alarm and a ticking time bomb. A temporary lowering of stress on the system, coupled with yet more groundwater flooding the magma-charged reservoir. This begs the haunting question volcanologists are increasingly too unnerved to ponder. Are these mounting hydrothermal blasts an urgent warning that Campi Flegrei's long-simmering unrest has finally entered its terminal countdown to eruption? Or are they ultimately minor pressure releases that are, paradoxically, buying the doomed caldera more time, a geological stay of execution before the lid inevitably blows in an apocalyptic failure? On this unnervingly quiet November morning in Pozzuoli, with steam still ominously hissing from freshly cracked streets, the grim reality of Campi Flegrei's rapidly escalating volcanic crisis is finally laid bare for all of Europe to fearfully witness. The continent's long slumbering supervolcano has now officially crossed the event horizon into uncharted territory, a diabolical point of no return. An inexorable geological feedback loop has been patiently and stealthily building for decades under hundreds of thousands of blissfully unaware residents. A subterranean cyclic bomb, quite literally arms and cocks itself with more explosive potential each time its pressurized fury is partially and violently vented to the surface. So as 1 million people anxiously cling to a tenuous sense of normalcy while unknowingly living out their daily lives above a continent-wrecking volcanic pressure cooker in the terminal stages of destabilization, the unsettling questions become more urgent and existentially pressing by the day. Just how much longer can Campi Flegrei's overburdened caprock continue to increasingly fracture and partially depressurize before it finally buckles and completely shatters, unable to contain the unbearable geothermal forces churning below? When the caldera's relentlessly building ring fault system finally shears itself apart in a sudden, high-magnitude seismic spasm? Will the violent shockwaves be enough to rudely awaken nearby Mount Vesuvius from its decades-long slumber, unleashing an unprecedented double eruption of historic proportions? And as Europe's most densely populated volcanic zone rapidly approaches its catastrophic breaking point, what nightmarish scenarios will unfold when the terrifying geological time bomb that authorities have nervously watched for years finally counts down to zero and then violently explodes with all of its long pent-up fury in an unstoppable volcanic chain reaction of cataclysmic destruction? The hydrothermal explosions have burst into the open. The warning signs are converging toward critical mass. The doomsday clock has begun ticking, and as each day brings us one step closer to the long, dreaded moment of geological truth, the question that looms over Naples like an apocalyptic spectre is, will anyone truly be prepared for the unfolding cataclysm when the slumbering titan inevitably awakens hungry for fiery vengeance on the civilization huddled on its flanks? Be sure to subscribe to the latest breaking news updates on the Campi Flegrei volcanic crisis, a rapidly unfolding natural disaster that threatens to reshape the European continent as we know it, and it could happen explosively. This is Earth Attacks, bringing you the dark side of our restless planet and the sobering science behind civilization's worst geological nightmares. Share this urgent report with everyone you know, because when this long-feared volcanic time bomb finally detonates, the ripple effects will shake the world.